A reading from Numbers. The rabble among them had a strong craving, and the Israelites also wept again and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there's nothing at all but this manna to look at." Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, all at the entrances of their tents. Then the Lord became very angry, and Moses was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you treated your servant so badly? Why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give birth to them, that you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a sucking child, to the land that you promised on oath to their ancestors'? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people?' For they came weeping to me and say, 'Give us meat to eat.' I am not able to carry all this people alone, for they are too heavy for me. If this is the way you are going to treat me, put me to death at once, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my misery." So the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tent of meeting and have them take their place there with you." So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 elders of the people and placed them all around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not do so again. 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." And Joshua, son of Nun, the assistant of Moses, one of his chosen men, said, "My lord Moses, stop them." But Moses said to him, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit on them." The word of the Lord.
So when I was in college, I got hooked on watching the original TV series, The A-Team. And I point out that I am so old I was watching this not in rerun. It was a series, the original series, about a bunch of Vietnam-era vets, who were young guys back then, who were wrongly accused of a crime they did not commit and locked in the brig. But because they were like special forces guys, they promptly escaped and came together as a bunch of modern Robin Hoods who helped people who seemed beyond help. Their exploits always involved elaborate disguises, ingenious contraptions built by Mr. T, and sometimes a fair amount of luck. The audience was never sure how it was all going to come together, but in the end, the plan always worked. And at the end of every episode, Hannibal, the leader of the group, would sit back and smile with a big cigar in his mouth, and he would say, "I love it when a plan comes together." And I love it when a plan comes together, too. It is a great feeling when people have worked together, overcome great obstacles, and put their resources together for a common mission. It's just great when a plan comes together. But this morning's first reading from Numbers is nothing like a plan coming together. In fact, it's a total mess from start to finish. Today's story begins not long after God had freed the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea and felt triumphant over their enemies, but almost immediately the complaining began. They were free, but they had no food. So God gave them manna, and a crisis was averted. But now, not long afterwards, they are tired of this stinking manna. They remembered all the foods they ate in Egypt and all the great things that they had, and things apparently started to get kind of ugly. The rabble, the writer says, had a strong craving. The Lord was angry, and Moses, well, he was displeased. But I don't know, if you're so displeased that you say to God, "Just take my life away, just shoot me already," you're a little bit more than just displeased. Thing is, Everybody was upset with everybody else. They were in the middle of the desert with limited food, literally no roadmap, and nobody even seemed to have a plan for moving forward. So in the midst of this mess, God tells Moses what sounds like the beginning of a plan. Gather 70 elders, that is, people who were respected and would be listened to, and bring them to the tent of meeting. So Moses tells the people what God said, and everybody seems to think that this is a good start to fixing the mess. But then, things get messier. Two guys, Eldad and Medad, apparently didn't show up at the meeting. I mean, they had one meeting, one job to do, supposed to show up at the meeting. They were just supposed to stand there. There wasn't even any reading they had to do ahead of time. They didn't have to make a PowerPoint presentation ready for it. All they had to do was show up, and they couldn't even manage that. Then, God puts His Spirit on the 70, and when He does that, He includes Eldad and Medad, even though they are not cooperating with the plan. But this gets everybody in the camp upset, so they come running to Moses and go, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Sounds like a bunch of little kids. To which Joshua, the assistant of Moses, gets all huffy and goes, My Lord Moses, stop this, because this is not how the plan is supposed to work. As the story ends, everything is as much of a mess, if not even more of a mess, than it was at the start. This is nothing like a plan coming together. I mean, why even remember this in the Bible anyway? Except that maybe the messiness is the point. You know, I love it when a plan comes together. I want to stick to the plan. I want others to stick to the plan. And often, I even expect God to cooperate with my plans. But this story's a mess. Yet maybe the messiness is the point. Maybe the point of this story is that the mess is sometimes a necessary part of how God gets us from where we are to where God wants us to be. I mean, God could have simply magically transported the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. If He can part the Red Sea, He could have created a, Doctor Who-like portal or something and just gotten them there. But the journey they were taking helped them to learn how to live with one another once they had reached the Promised Land, to grow in community with each other, and to live into and develop their relationship with God. And sometimes journeys, really all the time, journeys like that are just necessarily messy. And the mess is part of the plan. Maybe the message of this story is that God works even through human messes. This was not the first mess the people of Israel found themselves in, and it wasn't the last. But in every mess, God was at work helping them through it and guiding them into a new way of living. And maybe one of the important lessons they learned was to look for God in the midst of the messes of their lives, and not just when their plans seemed to be coming together. And maybe the messiness is the point, because the message is that even people who cannot get with the program are still included and still have a part to play. Because, honestly, we don't know why Eldad and Medad didn't show up. Did they just flake out and forget? Or didn't they think it was that important to show up? It didn't matter to God. God could and will and would still work through people like Eldad and Medad, even if they weren't entirely cooperating with the plan, and even if other people didn't think it was appropriate. I think stories like this are really important for us right now, because so much of life seems messy around us. Like the ancient Israelites, we're moving from a time and a place where we knew how things worked to a new post-COVID world and reality. And sometimes it's just messy. Often, I find myself wishing that I had a clearer plan and a roadmap for the future and how everything was all going to work out. Maybe you have wished for that also. But maybe stories like this remind us that even when things are messy, it's still true for us that the messes may be part of how God moves us from where we were to where we need to be. Because I realize I often resist change in my life because I don't like the messiness that comes with figuring out new ways of doing things. But sometimes, like a home renovation project, of which I have done many, I realize that there is just no way to get to the new without first creating a big mess. And it's true for me that some of the things that I'm doing differently now, I would not have even been willing to try if things hadn't stopped and forced me to think about things in a new way. And that's true even when before this all started, I knew, hey, something's got to change here, but I didn't want to open up a can of worms and create a big mess, even though I knew the mess would be important. So maybe one of the main messages in this story is that instead of trying to avoid messiness in life or to get past it as quickly as we possibly can, maybe we should be willing to live with the mess for a little while when that mess is necessary to get us to where God is calling us to be. Maybe for us too, it's true that we need to be always looking for the fact that God is always at work, even and especially in the midst of our messes. Because I really would like God to make things neat and clear for me. But it's also been the case that I have been open to seeing God at work and God's call to use things and do things in different ways that I would not have been willing to do if we weren't in the middle of a mess. So I was thinking about that the other day when we were having this online book discussion, which has really been very well attended, and people have been there and we've been having a good time. And it's not like we couldn't have done this pre-COVID, to get people together, because some of the problems that we faced in getting people together for a book discussion were that if we said to people, hey, you got to show up at church at X hour on X day, it didn't matter what the hour was or what the day was, people couldn't be there. But more people could be there using Zoom. And I was open to doing that in a way that I wasn't before because of the mess. And sometimes looking for God in the midst of the mess of life opens you up to things you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Maybe the mess is part of the point. And maybe for us too. The story of Numbers and all of this mess and things like that means that even when things are messy, God always has a place for us, even when we feel like we haven't been able to get with the program or frankly, even have half a clue what the program is supposed to be. Maybe Eldad and Medad didn't get with the program because they really didn't think that they were really all that important or that God really needed them all that much. After all, they're just two of a bunch of 70, and they're not even going to be missed if they're not at the meeting. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But sometimes, when things are messy in our lives, as they were in theirs, we feel disconnected, ignored, or anxious, or all three. And I feel like a lot of the social and the political angst and anxiety we have right now stems from people feeling disconnected, or left out, or anxious. Those feelings are real, and it's really essential for us to acknowledge that that is how people feel, regardless of whether we think they should be feeling that way. That's the way people feel when things are messy. And maybe one of the lessons of this story is that God has a promise for everybody, whether we're feeling like that right now or not. And the promise is that there will be a future for us, and that we'll all be included in it, even when we feel like we're out of control or on the periphery of what's going on in the world around us. I love it when a plan comes together. But today's readings remind us that sometimes a mess is the necessary prelude to things coming together. Today's readings promise us that God is always at work in the mess, even the messes of our own making. And today's readings call us, even when we're feeling like we're on the periphery, to look for how God is working in each of our lives to move us all from where we are to where God is calling us to be.